All right, guys, looks like we have a quorum with Frank and also Stephanie. Let's get going on this. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting of order, special meeting on January 9th. It's 2023. Again, pursuant to Assembly Bill 361, along with the governor's state of emergency declaration issued on March 4th. This meeting will be conducted via teleconference, and the information for the meeting can be found on our website. I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order and then move on to the roll call. I'll ask Carlos if you can know for the record the attendance, and then we'll move on to approval of the agenda. At this time, the Board Corporation Authority may announce any items being pulled. Any items being pulled, Dr. Martin?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, seeing none, we'll move on to new business. This is an update on Glenroy Resort Site and Riverside County purchase. Gabriel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will share my screen. Also, can we add Melissa Noon from Riverside and Dr. Matt Chung to as a panelist as well? Can everybody see my screen?
We can.
Thank you. Just wanted to give the City Council an update in regards to this site. It is the old Glenroy site that was supposed to be the first hotel in the city of Coachella. Recently, the county is moving forward with an item tomorrow to purchase the property for $31 million. Just wanted to give everybody a little timeline, a little history about the project. We started our meetings with the county, and at that time, their developer, Sonam Leak, on March 7th. And during that time, the city worked with this developer as an agent of the county. We also included a support letter on March 23rd for the grant itself, and that was submitted with the grant application. And during that time, on March 23rd, the county came in and did a PowerPoint presentation on the project and the Recovery Village concept. And on March 29th, we provided a letter of support for that BHCIP grant. From April all the way to November, the city worked diligently with Sonam Leak to answer other questions, talk about the DA, CEQA. During that time, also the current property owner was working with a hotel developer that was interested in the site. Since then, that hotel developer has moved on. We noticed that on December 13th that the county initiated an action to notice of intention to purchase this real property. And it's going to the Board of Supervisors tomorrow to authorize the purchase of the real property. These are kind of the economic development issues that we've came up with. While the city did support the county in promoting mental health and wellness in the region, city provided that letter of support for the grant. things that we considered were this project site.
Interpreter, can you please change to the Spanish channel?
This project site particularly was very important to the city. It would have moved on to be the largest tax generating commercial zone in the city. That was able to generate a lot of retail tax, TOT tax, sales tax, property tax, and improve the long-term financial outlook for the city. Agents of the county were the Asylum League was negotiating on behalf of the county during this project during that time, and said the city would be compensated financially on an ongoing basis with the entitled resort, and there was a need for transparency and coordination between the county and city. We did a fiscal analysis. During that time, there were numbers that were thrown out, but we were able to kind of conclude the number based on our fiscal department's, our finance department's analysis, and based on the TOT tax, sales tax, property tax, utility user tax. It's about 1.3 million this project would generate for the city on an annual basis. And if you consider that over the next 50 years, it's about $148 million. The city would need to adjust those for inflation over the next 50 years. Also note that Comwater US Art Rec, Coachella LLC still owes the city $32,000 in legal fees for the development agreement they never moved forward with. And that the city would like to capture that as well. These are kind of the impacts of the county purchasing the site. We did a pros and cons. Obviously, the cons would be the loss of tax revenue, the loss of the first hospitality project in the city. The city spent 7 years developing this project, doing a development agreement, working with creating a CFD, and working with the county to do offsite improvements on Avenue 48 as well. The loss of the largest economic development catalyst project for the city. And we would also lose local zoning control. Those are the cons if the county were to purchase the property. And there are pros if the county were to purchase the property. It would eliminate the blighted construction site that's been there for the last 3-4 years. The offsite improvements along Avenue 48 and Van Buren would be completed. The job does move to do job creation anywhere from low to high income occupations, from administrators to doctors, psychiatrists. And the project will be guaranteed to be completed by 2026 due to the grant requirements. During this time, I would like to invite the county to do their presentation on what they provided new renderings and new site on how this project would look. So I would like them to jump in and do their presentation at this time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Martin, very much. Matt Chang, I'm with Riverside University Health System Behavioral Health. If it's okay, I will, first of all, grateful, as I said, for the time today. I'll share my screen and just try and show some pictures and some information if I could. Oh boy, but when I want to share it, it gets super complicated. Let's try this. Can you guys see that okay? Does it look like a slide, Gabriel? All right. All right. Halfway there. So again, thank you very much, City Council. Appreciate the time. I will certainly talk about the Recovery Village specifics and why we think it's a critical need and why they're important services. But I wanted to also provide some context as to where it fits into provision of behavioral health services, and then just the provision of all health services generally. So the first thing I want to say, and I'll try and move quickly through these pieces because I know there's time constraints and I want to leave room for questions, but it's not, generally speaking, we don't just function as behavioral health, and in a project such as this, we wouldn't be functioning just as behavioral health. We're Riverside University Health System. We include a medical center. There's 44, I believe, hospital-based clinics. There are 14 community health centers spread throughout the county. Public health, all the work we've seen them do during COVID, and knock on wood, hopefully coming out of COVID, all their work they're doing on social determinants of health and population health, and then us, and we're behavioral health. And so, who we are, who we serve, we currently have 79 internally run behavioral health sites. We partner with a lot of community-based organizations. We're partnered with 140 CBOs spread throughout the county. We're in 100 plus school sites. This is something that we're very excited about, and that this speaks to the need for behavioral health services, the need for early intervention, prevention, early intervention, and then getting folks the right level of care. And then annually, we see about 60,000 folks a year, and that's over the whole service array. So ER, crisis, inpatient, outpatient, but the whole gamut of services. And to do that, we have built out a continuum of care. And so here on the top line, the top side, you see behavioral health, and the lower part, you see the substance abuse prevention and treatment. But essentially, they both follow the same pattern, where there is lower level needs and lower level services moving all the way up. And so, for example, a lower level of need might be a CARES line. That's where someone calls in and gets triaged. They talk to our staff and get triaged to the right level of care. Parent-child interactional therapy is part of our early intervention programs. And then moving on to our outpatient levels of care, full source partnerships, which I'll talk on, and all the way up to crisis care, acute hospital care, and long-term care. And then in a similar vein, on the substance abuse prevention and treatment side, there are lower levels of care moving up the continuum to higher levels of care. So we have Friday Night Live. That's a project that we're very proud of, and I'm going to get it wrong. I believe we're in 80 plus schools currently, and my team will correct me because they're better than I am, but we're in a bunch of schools as we try to interface with the community, prevention and early intervention there, outpatient systems, all the way up to partial hospitalizations and residential care. So, you hear the adage, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. A lot of work we've been doing, and I'll talk about it, has been sort of the opposite of that, right? A real focus on right care, right time, right place. And by expanding the types of services that we are able to provide, we're better or best able to slot individuals, patients, we call them consumers, into those levels of care. One thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that I know that the conversation about money and funding and all that stuff is, we struggle significantly as well. And I can get into some of these details, but long story short, we're about $184 million short, $186 million short each and every year to provide behavioral health and substance use services throughout the county of Riverside. This gets into inequitable and antiquated funding formulas such as 1991 realignment, 2011 realignment. If there's a desire, I'll certainly go through that piece. But we are actually $800 million behind LA County, and they say they don't have enough money to do the types of services that they need to do. And every second we fall behind by $25 to LA County in terms of behavioral health funding. So, if you look at a chart of all the counties, we are either, depending on how you look at it, we're either 56th or 57th per capita in terms of annual behavioral health funding. And so I think in the interest of time, I left this slide out of this presentation, but knowing that's our baseline, knowing that that is a lot of our fiscal challenges, we have tried to go out and get grant funds, which I think ties into this conversation today. And so, this is my simplified approach, and I apologize, but this is sort of how I see it. Part of the problem, I said we see about 60,000 folks a year. Based on prevalence rates, we know we need to see additional 100 to 110,000 population for folks with behavioral health issues. There's a rising need in the community. Riverside County is growing so quickly. It's the fastest growing county in California, second in the country. And this gets sort of into the conversation on covered village or not, but we have an aging behavioral health hospital that we need a new one. And then with all the great work that RUHS as a whole did during COVID as a regional state leader, we took folks above and beyond our capacity. So our 77-bed inpatient facility was at 100 patients or 100 consumers. Not enough money. I think that gets into, we're short 184, whatever that number is annually, each and every year, and not enough beds. So a couple parts here. So we call child, or our definition of child, is 0 to 12. There are actually no child inpatient beds anywhere in Riverside County at all. We have adolescent beds, so 13 to 18. But if we ever have a child who needs acute inpatient care, the only one there is in the Inland Empire is at Loma Linda, and those beds are often full. Additionally, we know we need significant help with housing. That's part of the work that we've been doing as well, and then placements. So, money, beds, different types of beds, housing and placements. Those are all things which are a significant challenge for us. And I'm not going to proselytize too much, but there's a lot of conversation about, if you look at the IE and Riverside, I know we're short on a wide variety of things, right? Judgeships, primary care providers, everywhere you look, we're short. Biased, obviously. But I actually think that behavioral health, knowing that we're 56 or 57th out of 58, actually gets it the shortest end of the stick. So that's part of the challenge where we're coming from. Despite that, we've done some things that we're very proud of the last couple of years. So, with competitive grant funds, which has been part of our strategy, we have opened over 300 beds in different levels of care up and down the continuum. And that's actually more than any other county behavioral health department did throughout the state, A. And B, we believe that's actually more than all the other county behavioral health departments combined open during COVID. So that was good. The bad news is they're all full now. They're totally full. And I've spent a good chunk of today just trying to figure out how we can move folks around and how we can build some capacity, because there is just such ongoing need. We do have some beds incoming. This is a smaller project, but I'm under no illusion. I'm sure that 2 weeks after that they'll be full, and that's a challenge. So I mentioned competitive grants, and then crisis teams, and I can speak to this if you all are interested. But another part about this is building out our crisis response so that they can interact in the community and help divert folks, if appropriate, out of a psychiatric hold or a 5150 into an outpatient level of care. Again, trying to solve these issues, we've developed a lot of full service partnership programs, and I'll speak a little bit about that. Those are our most intensive, aggressive outpatient services that we provide. And it pertains to the village because that's sort of the type of service level and provision we want to interweave throughout the villages. Behavioral health integration, this speaks to, let me back up a second. So we know that people with mental illness die on average 15 to 20 years younger than the general population. In Riverside County, it's much worse. So folks with mental illness were dying at the average age of 42 years old, and they're dying of preventable causes: diabetes, hypertension, pulmonary disease. And we talk about, the disparities, the inequities that we see. It's certainly a huge need. And this speaks to, over the last several years, we've undergone a bit of a integration project where we are inputting psychiatry, therapy, and substance abuse services at all the RUHS community health centers to get our consumers the physical health care that they need, but B, also to screen those other patients, consumers who might have behavioral health needs. And that's been a nice project as we continue to roll that out. CalAIM and CareCourt, I don't know how, well, it is germane to the conversation in this sense. So this is sort of indicative of us trying to shape programs and have a large seat at the table. CalAIM is the innovation, evolution, revolution of Medi-Cal. CareCourt is a relatively recent project by, by Governor Newsom to be able to treat folks who might not avail themselves of voluntary services. And so for CareCourt, Riverside County opted into becoming one of cohort 1. That's one of the first, we're one of 7 counties to opt into CareCourt, and that will go live in October of 23. And the reason that's sort of germane here is it's critical to have the whole resources, housing, placements available to take care of those individuals as well. And Recovery Village in the future, that's sort of really what we're talking about, so I'll skip that part for now. I'm going to go relatively quickly through this. I think I know we don't talk about the village and answer those questions, but I also appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all and try and hopefully just talk about some of the services that we're providing, if nothing else, to have these conversations. So full service partnership, again, these are most intensive, aggressive outpatient services we provide. They are very effective. So RAND is a think tank out of Santa Monica. They looked at LA's mental health FSPs, and there they found that they had significant decrease in arrests, psychiatric hospitalizations, mental health emergencies, physical health emergencies, and rates of homelessness. And you look at our own data, it closely mimics those positive outcomes. And so what we tried to do is build more of the airplane out of that black box material and really embrace the concept of full service partnerships throughout our continuum of care. We've changed the criteria to make it much easier to get into an FSP slot and much harder to get out of one. And what that means is essentially that instead of waiting for a consumer to be hospitalized multiple times, to be homeless multiple times, to be locked up multiple times, this is us trying to intervene earlier and get them into a higher level of care with the appropriate staffing and staff ratio so they have positive outcomes. And those outcomes, again, involve getting off the street, not going to the psychiatric ER, not going to a medical ER, and not getting arrested. And then the other part about this, so we have forensic FSP data, and to get a forensic FSP program, come out of jail, prison, or what's known as our AB 109 program. And I think the interesting part to note here is that they've been arrested, and of course the picture's right in the slot where I can see it, by about 82%. And that's because, it's not because these folks are dodging law enforcement, but rather that when you have appropriate housing, when you have appropriate placement, when you have the appropriate types of services, and not behavioral health services, social services wrapped around them, these individuals do much better. And so it's really, again, us trying to build out those types of services throughout the county. All right. I know we wanted to talk about the Recovery Village and the site, and so I just want to do a couple of pieces here. So, and Gabriel, please keep me on task and honest here. But this is a picture of the current site. Well, this is taken a couple months ago, but it's 84-151 Avenue 48. This is what it looked like relatively recently, the grounds. And so again, what we're trying to do is build a recovery village. And so that begs the question, what is a recovery village? And the reason I spent some time talking about the rest of our services and the rest of the continuum of care, because honestly, I do think it kind of coalesces up into the conversation about recovery villages. We've been very focused. Well, let me back up. So what a recovery village is, it's at its core, it's a campus, right? It's a campus that has the full continuum of behavioral health services, the full continuum of physical health services, the full continuum of substance use services, and an array of housing and placement options. But really interwoven into all of that is a focus on social determinants of health. And this is part of what we learned with our friends at Public Health during the pandemic, but we learned a lot about social determinants of health. We learned about disparate things such as tree canopy and supermarket access have a real outsized impact on your healthiness and well-being. And so really what we're trying to, so I mentioned the work of the FSP programs. I skipped, in the interest of time, some of the other crisis team work and mental health urgent care. But a lot of that focus is, if you talk about a hierarchy of needs, it's really focused on the last two levels, I would say. So safety needs and physiological needs. And what we want to do for for the consumers in the area is to move up that chain, as it were, up that pyramid, much more towards self-actualization. So in addition to all the services I mentioned, a heavy focus on educational training, vocational training, occupational training will be critical. And then the other thing I want to mention, since I mentioned social determinants of health, is the HPI, or Healthy Places Index. This is a tool that I learned about through public health, and so I'm not an expert, let me preface it there. But essentially it looks at the social determinants of health and sort of gives you a percentile of where you are. And so, 50th percentile would be right in the, I don't know if it's mean or median, but right in the middle essentially. And for this site, for the census tract, the HPI is 10.8. And so I think that just indicates, again, the clear need for services and these types of services in that area. Let me say this. So we're looking at other recovery villages throughout Riverside County. And so this portion of the presentation is taken from the different recovery village conversation, but the tenets are the same. So hopefully some of these terms now make a little more sense, but the FSP programs and innovative solutions towards the continuum of care, not just behavioral health, but physical health services and multiple levels of care. And then really also this focus on youth, right? This is something that we know as we look at our own data, increasing needs, increasing demands for our youth when it comes to behavioral health. And so it's a safe place for youth to grow. Trauma-informed therapy, we're trying to make that a central component of us building out these villages. And then these partnerships with other community partners as we build these out. And then this piece here, and you'll hear us say a lot, maybe we need to be more creative, but it really is, right care, right time, right place. We know that a lot of unnecessary needs can be generated if you send someone to a psych ER unnecessarily, if you send someone to a medical ER unnecessarily, if you send someone to jail unnecessarily. And a lot of this focus is to provide the right type of care. We've been quite effective at intervening in a crisis situation, obviating the need for 5150 or breaking the 5150 and getting them into close outpatient follow-up so they don't require a psychiatric admission post-contact. And again, the housing stability and decrease homelessness, that's another large part of what we're trying to work on as we build out these recovery villages. And then, what it can look like, right? And this part I have in here, if I can, I'll compare and contrast to our own facility. How's that? So we have our inpatient psychiatric hospital in Riverside City has been wonderful. It's been great. It's also over 30 years old now, I think. And it's sort of what I think of a stereotypical behavioral health facility. So, old, scary, dilapidated. If you see the movie One Flew Over Cuckoo's Nest, it looks kind of like that a little bit. Again, at the time it was not, but now it's been some time. But we do want to share that we intend to make these really beautiful facilities, beautiful communities. It's a huge investment by the county. I think to bring all of these services and housing and jobs that were mentioned, and I think these are good jobs and critical jobs, and from our perspective, workforce education, that's a critical need as well, which will come out of this. And then again, it'll be a beautiful piece. And then, so let me talk through this a little bit. So first thing I want to note is that this is not the Coachella Recovery Village at all. Let me start there. But the second thing I want to note is that the same concepts will certainly be involved in this project. So you have things, the Hemet Recovery Village has a community park, the Village Trail, a sensory garden, the Village Theater, sports courts. And this is again, and on top of all our regular behavioral health services, physical health services, these are sort of the added parts that we really believe raise what the recovery village, can be and should be. And I will note, I mean, I'm reading between the lines a good amount, but when we met with folks from the state, this concept seems to resonate with them. They did, award this project a good chunk of change when it comes to grant funds. And so we just think it's really, a critical part for Coachella. Again, when we look at HPI scores, it seems like there's a significant need. we've heard at least in the past, from the community that they want more, behavioral health services. This is our approach to try and answer that, and also bring our physical health friends, because that's really been our integrated approach over the last couple of years. And really, it's just, I think it's a crown jewel for our behavioral health services and department, and something that the state really is looking for and supports as well. And so I think, Gabriel, I think that's it here, and I will stop sharing. Yeah, thank you for the time.
Thank you,
Hey.
Dr. Chang.
And Dr. Chang, probably the time now to go into questions and can
Well,
you
Mr.
go over?
Mayor, I wanted to put up the direction, so let me show this as one more slide, and then you guys can have the discussion. This is a potential council direction. We have requested that the county move and continue the land purchase until the February 7th Board of Supervisor meeting. And during that time, we are getting council direction to continue to negotiate with the County of Riverside in an in lieu agreement that makes the city economically whole, and bring that back to you for our city council meeting on January 25th. And the other outcomes can be any other alternative council direction. That being said, I would like to open it up any questions for city council or comments.
And Gabriel, could I say one other piece before we turn it over? And I apologize, I should have mentioned this earlier, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yeah, and so this just and like I said, we appreciate the time and the conversation today. Part of the issue is and I'm sure we'll talk about the timelines, but we do believe that these grant funds are at risk. It's a good chunk of change. I think that the state would have wanted us to be further ahead at this point, and that's saying it gently. So I just wanted to kind of put this piece out here that we certainly appreciate the conversation and the questions and the further discussion, but just so we're clear, like I personally at least have some concerns about these grant funds. And the other thing I want to mention again before I turn it over is we're short 184 million or wherever that is. We do think so this grant program is called BCHIP. We do think this is a once in a generation opportunity. Maybe it's not. Maybe next year the governor like, just kidding. We got tons and tons of money. You guys all get double or triple. But it doesn't necessarily look like it's going that way. So with that, Mr. City Manager, I apologize, but that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chang.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Chang and Gabriel. I'm just curious, the numbers on behavioral health, how many beds are you proposing here? And if you could just elaborate, then like who's coming here? Because it's not Coachella, it's probably Coachella Valley, probably Riverside County wide in terms of how many people or patients will be coming to this site. Yes, there'll be maybe 1% or 3%, whatever the percentage is of Coachella that would go here, but what's the general build out? What's that look like?
So I appreciate that, and I'm going to ask Melissa if she can comment on the number of beds, and I can speak to your second part, sir, the first part. So you speak the number.
Sure. So inclusive, excuse me, of all of the programs, it would be approximately 450 beds.
And sir, so I think a couple things. And let me be upfront. I don't think we cannot say only people from Coachella can use this project. That's part one. It might not surprise you to hear that we have similar conversations when we talk with other cities about what are you doing in my city and where are you building and I think what we are sharing is that there is significant need in the area and the city, based on HPI, based on what we look at in terms of unmet need when it comes to behavioral health. And so again, this is probably, maybe it's not answering your question appropriately or directly, but when we engage in another project that was conceptually similar in terms of concerns with the city, we met with their city staff regularly. We kept data on, what city those folks came from and where they went back to. And I think in that scenario, we could pretty clearly show to our satisfaction as well as satisfaction of our city partners and their law enforcement partners that, the vast majority there were coming from, in this case, Riverside City or Riverside City adjacent. And so can't give you an exact number. I think, what the other thing I could share is that we had another conversation with another city from the other side, being like, hey, we don't have this thing. We don't have this thing. We want to get our consumers into this project. And are you not letting these people in? And we said, no, it's a countywide project, regional project, whatever it is. But we are working with the local community to make sure that they get first crack. And again, there is such pent up need that honestly, the last couple of years, we opened something and, a week later it's full. And I'm not saying that all 450 beds will fit a week later, but there's just such pent up need. And for instance, we opened a project, 50 beds, and literally, no, more than that, 60 something beds. Probably the next week we needed beds. I was checking to see if their beds are completely full. And they've been basically completely full,
The need is there. Obviously, 450 beds will help meet the need, right? And you have a number of different wraparound services associated with the project. So obviously, in terms of what you do at the site, you guys know what to do with Riverside County. Like Riverside County, you know what to do on the mental health sides and wrap around and for kids, for adults, for older people, whoever needs mental health services, you guys have that. And maybe I'll just start this conversation in terms of how we were looking at this, because the history here matters, and we had spoken to Sonnenblick, who they were part of the county's team, and our thing has always been that, it's about the site for us. This is Coachella's first and only kind of economic development potential here in terms of hotel. It's supposed to generate 1.4, 1.7. I'm not sure how we got 147 million over 50 years, but there's an economic output that we were supposed to expect from this project. There are other developers that have been coming. We've been in communication with the bank. And the bank has basically said, hey, $31 million full offer Riverside County. It sounds very attractive to them, right? And so our thing is like, hey, the bank gets what they want, Riverside County gets what they want, and then the city doesn't get what it wants or needs. And I say that in the standpoint of, we have 3 police officers in the city of Coachella. There's 450 beds of mental health services that would be added. I imagine because patients have their rights, the care courts, there is homeless facilities right along the other side. There's going to be a need for service of more, public law enforcement going there. Well, who pays for that? Is the city going to pay for that? Are you guys going to pay for that? What's the impact? And in addition, the city also got recently approached in Cochelita for apartments out there, mental health apartments as well, another 80 units. So now all of a sudden, Coachella goes from having 0 to potentially somewhere 530 beds, or apartments, beds in total. And can a city like Coachella handle this? And while you may build the wraparound services, there's somewhat of an equity issue that I'm thinking about. Like how is the city a partner? Or is the city a partner? If you take away the only economic development kind of hotel potential, are we being? It was represented to us that we were going to be made whole. You saw some numbers today, 1.3, 1.4. That goes away. Calls for services probably might go up, and we probably need to get into discussion of what that looks like, and a bunch of traffic, et cetera. And by the way, Gabriel, that Avenue 48 is going to get we have a grant for that, so that's gonna get improved anyways. It should be under construction this year. So this project will not have to do that. It's just gonna happen. So I'm really curious of like, what happened to making the city whole? And in some ways, is that a consideration? Can we still make that happen? Because that changes things for me. If we're just kind of altruistically doing this, you know what I mean? Because we're not charged as the city of meeting the mental health needs. I think for me, it's more about the site and my economic, what we need economically. Even though I understand that it's blighted right now and doesn't look in good shape, but there are certain things we can do to make sure that the bank mitigates the look of the hotel site.
No, I appreciate that. I think I want to address a small part of that maybe for the larger conversation. So just about the housing units, I think sort of based on the other conversation, you talk about No Place Like Home, and just for the purpose of this group, No Place Like Home is the other competitive grant funds that we've gone after. We've drawn down to date at like 82 odd million, I think, for it. But the nice thing about that is that it is some units are certainly for people with serious mental illness. That's a good chunk of them, but it also allows developers to leverage those funds to build affordable housing units for folks who don't have serious mental illness, but are at risk of homelessness, housing instability, without necessarily a behavioral health component. And so the reason I bring that up is, and Melissa or somebody on my team's gonna have to keep me honest, I think the No Place Like Home funding is a total of 400-ish units for folks with serious mental illness, but really allows developers to build a total of 1,000 units spread throughout the county. So I think that the cool part about it from my perspective, and we can certainly disagree, is that yes, it's units for folks with mental illness and serious mental illness, but it's also for additional affordable housing units for folks who don't have mental illness. And when we look at like the point in time count, when we look at we're very we're involved in with some of the board of governance and the continuum of care, looking at housing issues kind of throughout the county. We just see over and over a need for more housing, more placements. To speak to the other part, and I completely hear you, sir, and the rest of the council and the city manager about what you need from the site. I certainly hear that and appreciate that. And I think that's the conversation. If we can't get to work, we can't get to work. And I think that's where it is. We continue to have these conversations with you all, but I think that's certainly on the table as well, sir.
Yeah, but do you see our position? Where we have 3 police officers serving 45,000 residents, and certainly there is going to be a public safety need. We'd be it's just things happen.
I certainly, and listen, I apologize. I don't mean to cut you off at all. I think we've had these conversations with other cities where they have similar concerns. And I think in those situations, we continue to talk with them about what that looks like and what those concerns are or may be. And so in this scenario, like hypothetically, we did go forward, we continue to talk that through. I think part of this is, and I don't know this, let me start there, but 2% of a population can take up 50% of a system's resources. And so I don't know if your 3 officers are interacting with the same people over and over and over again. But I think the point with the FSP programs and the housing programs are that when you have an appropriate housing and placement, and when you wrap appropriate services around them, they don't go do bad stuff they shouldn't necessarily, at least a much lower clip. So again, I'm not saying that completely wipes away all those concerns. It certainly is a concern. And again, I do understand your position, sir, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You know, hypothetically, if it did work, you know, we could continue to have those conversations around impacting the community from that perspective as well.
I'm sure there's other council members that want to chime in, so we'll hear from them.
Thank you, Mr. Chang, for all of that and that wonderful presentation. There's no doubt in my mind that the county is going to be able to provide some of the most outstanding services and then also with consideration of obviously like some of the things that you discussed, like decreases in court, cases and all of that, and then decrease of substance abuse, right? And some of that you went into. And then also is obviously the training, the amenities that the facility or the village will provide, like occupational training, which is all this type of stuff that we know really give people the tools to be successful and then go out and live healthy, right, in their neighborhoods. My concern, similar to the mayor's, is obviously all the loss that we're going to be taking on. And I don't think it's just public safety or law enforcement, but it's going to be exhausting lots of local, services, right? Whether it's, like the street improvements that we're adding in. At no time did I think that the county was going to come in, and put this facility there. It was all in hopes that we're going to bring back that money, through TOT and through having a commercial zoning there. Additionally is, the energy usage that this type of facility and village is going to need. And when we're talking about law enforcement and public safety, it's not just law enforcement, but also obviously fire. And nor do I think that any of these residents of the village, are going to go out and commit crime, but more that it's just additional population to an already very, very small public safety staff that we have. And so that's more of my concern. Additionally is that I don't think, this is probably the best location, for this type of village is an entrance into our city. You mentioned that other villages will be going up as well, or are there other villages in the county that exist?
So there are other villages that are going up. We currently have applied for two total, let me be clear. So this one and the one in Hemet, which I mentioned, we are talking with other folks about other villages throughout sort of the area. And if I could just expand on that, part of this is, and I don't have this slide, and I apologize, but when we look at, service distribution throughout the county, Coachella is an area that doesn't seem to, your nearest stuff is in Indio, for substance use disorder, mental health, crisis residential, the acute inpatient there. And so we're trying to go somewhere where we feel we haven't been strong in the past, and there is a need, and that need is then borne out by the social determinants of health. But again, to answer your question, none of these exist, today. This was, through this grant funding that it's a possibility, but we like to build multiples of these throughout the county.
Would this be the first that would be completed if they were to move forward?
It would, yes.
And then if I may ask, why this location? Why would this location be your first village?
So part of it has to do with the grant fund. So, and Melissa, keep me honest, this was BCHIP round 3, which was launch ready. And so as a partially, I'm not a construction person, you can clearly tell, but as a partially done, remodel finishing piece, it was further ahead than a ground up piece, which Hemet, the reason I bring that up is Hemet is a ground up build.
Were there
Right, so-
other locations being considered in the East Valley outside of the one that you're looking at now in the city of Coachella?
So this gets into, and I'm going to be mindful about what I say. I think this property was brought to us as part of the RFP process. This particular project, despite.
You mean the RFP that the city put out?
No, this is the RFP that we put out. I'm sorry. This is a
I see.
response to RFP. Yeah.
Is this the only one that responded, or were there others?
There were other, I don't know, Melissa, if there are others in East Valley. I know there are others in the county that responded, and we, responded affirmatively to this one and the one in Hemet for the first round.
We did consider other sites, but were not feasible, and this was the only one proposed in Coachella.
And so I guess where I'm getting that too is that, did you consider maybe something in the unincorporated area in the county jurisdiction? We have quite a few streets that may fall under the county, but it still has obviously the address of the city of Coachella. And so is there any reason why it had to be inside the city of Coachella's jurisdiction, and why we couldn't build this type of facility, as you have both mentioned, that there is a need in the East Valley? I couldn't agree with you anymore. I'm 100% on board that this type of facility is needed, especially when you go on and talk about all the resources that you're going to provide. I think it's very well thought out, and I think you guys have done an outstanding job of covering all types of services that are needed, as well as short care and long care. But I'm just trying to understand why it has to be inside the city of Coachella, and why areas that border the city of Coachella weren't considered, instead of exhausting our resources that you placed that on the county.
And and Melissa, again, keep me honest, I don't know if they weren't considered. I know that when we put on RFP, this is a response RFP that had this particular project in this particular land. As Melissa mentioned, there are other respondents that were not awarded, but to my knowledge, Melissa, yes, they were not in the city, they're not in Coachella.
That's correct. The other respondents were either locations where there wasn't transportation or public transportation, or no connections to utilities that, we wouldn't be able to easily build infrastructure and wouldn't qualify us for that round of grant funding. And so this particular site that came to us when we put out the RFP was attractive to the state because it did have some of those partially built casitas or foundations that we intend to reuse for this purpose.
And I think you just brought up a key point, is that we have the infrastructure, and that's exactly when I say that we're exhausting local resources as you're coming into an area that we're building out. As far as the 25% that we put in to improve the Avenue 48 Main Street, and as well thinking back that we're going to get that in some type of TOT, considering that it's a commercial zone. And so, I want you both to understand that at no point, am I being critical, but more is that I want you guys just to both understand that we are a small city. We don't have a large revenue base. We don't have any TOT coming in, and it's highly needed in the city of Coachella. And so you would be coming into an area where their infrastructure is already in a highly undeveloped city. And so I just want you guys to take that into consideration of the impact that this is going to have on us. Thank you, Melissa and Mr. Chang.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for those questions. Any other council member want to chime in?
Just a couple of questions on my part. Can you hear me? I was having a hard time with my audio earlier. Thank you. So thank you so much, Dr. Chang, for the presentation, and Melissa. I know you mentioned that there would be about 450 beds in the village, and I understand that the needs that we have in our area and in the desert area. But would the beds always be, so I guess what I'm trying to ask is, would the village always be at capacity? Would we always make sure that those 450 beds are filled, or would we have some like on reserve, or how would that work specifically?
Can I ask a clarifying question? What do you when you say on reserve, like what do you mean there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so would we always be at capacity? Would we make sure that the 450 beds are filled at all times?
So I do not mean to be flippant at all. My response is that, we've opened projects and I was like, oh wow, we did so good. We opened these projects, well, lots of room. Like, this is great. I can take it easy for a day, and then they're completely full. So, I don't think we would open it and intend to keep things open. At least what we've seen to date is that inevitably all the beds fill. And again, like, I'm not saying there's an infinite number of people who will seek these beds and services, but our experience to date has been, the opposite, that we open it and within several days, week, 2 weeks, they are completely full.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then my other question is, I think you touched on it a little earlier when the mayor was asking, who would be in the village, but just to get a little bit more clarification, who exactly would be eligible to be in this village? Would it be individuals that are at risk of homelessness and that also need services? Like, are you able to provide maybe a couple of examples of who would be eligible to enter and be in the village?
Sure. So I think it's a whole bunch of people, right? I think, yes, it's people who are homeless or at the risk of homelessness. The most recent pit count was 33 something, and that's, a snapshot, and that likely is a number, 2 or 3 times higher, the actual amount. That's, I don't know. That's a conversation if you're going to, but I think there's a large number of people there that are at risk. A or B, it's people who would just come into the village and get their behavioral health care. Community members to get their behavioral health care. We have the full continuum of behavioral health care. So you have like lower touches, prevention, early intervention, school type early intervention programs, ranging up to crisis care, more higher needs, FSP, higher levels of care. And then on top of that, we'd like it to be, the supermarket access where folks from the community, if they want to come and come get their groceries. I think if, there's educational training, vocational training, partnering with local community colleges in the area, we'd like, community members to avail themselves of those, resources as well. I mean, I think when we talk about these villages, wherever we're talking about them, we have certainly a circumscribed number of consumers that we think of immediately. But the more we do this, in population health, social terms of health, it sort of bleeds over. Poor choice of words. It expands over. And so there is more folks need different levels of care. But it's not, it's not just like the people who are absolutely critically super seriously mentally ill, but rather, the parents with their kids who are having some trouble, behavioral health issues at school be able to come in. The grandma who needs, physical health care, the person who is homeless and gets those services, but really is intended for the entire community.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, I know you made it clear that, we don't exactly have any recovery villages in the county, but are you able to point to any examples in the state of California or outside of state that have, put this, vision already, and that we can take a look at, or, just use it as an example?
So not trying to be flippant again, but no, because we're the best. No, I think, and the reason I say this is, we have an amazing team. Like Melissa's on, I think Ryan's on somewhere, I'm not sure. We have an amazing team. And we talk with the state a lot, and we sort of research nationally, at least, what's going on. And part of the reason we feel that the state, so I don't know if I said this or not, but the 75.9 million for round 3 that they gave was the single largest award in BCHIP that they gave that round, and I think that still holds true. The state is really looking at this as a novel, innovative way to approach behavioral health care, and really, they don't say this, let me preface this, but I think it's also population health. And so from a negative side, no, I can't point you to, this city over here is doing it. But from a positive side, we do feel it is cutting edge, innovative, and really has a lot of impact. And last thing I'll say is that it was on a panel a little while ago with a group that is looking to do something semi-similar in Orange County. So they're looking at behavioral health care, physical health care, substance, and housing was tied into it. But the part that distinguishes this project, in my mind, again, is the focus on social determinants of health, population health, involving everyone that they're able to come in, the educational training, vocational training, partnerships with community colleges, that's sort of, I think, the special sauce, or at least what the state sees as a special sauce for these types of projects.
Okay, thank you. Those were all my questions.
Thank you. Any other questions? See none. I think you got some good feedback. Dr. Chang and Gabriel, I think there's a lot of considerations that or that we need to have in terms of being made whole. I think it's the site, and I want to be careful about, what we're all charged with, right? And Councilmember Delgado mentioned some good, deals there where we kind of looked at this as an economic development generator, and is the city going to get paid back? Will we have, potential to kind of realize that whole economic development zone? And then at the same time, I think, from kind of an altruistic point of view, and us wanting to do what's right, is that equity issue, or is this the appropriate site, and is it too big for our small little city? I mean, I think that's really where staff has to really kind of dig through and do the analysis and get back to us in terms of how do we create win-wins all the way across the board, from the city winning, the site winning, the county winning, the mental health winning, and it just win-wins. I mean, I think when we operate that way, I think it's easier, and then we can really kind of be good partners to one another. So.
So with that, I do support staff recommendation to move it to the February date for further considerations and analysis.
So staff recommendation is that the city go back and negotiate with the county and figure out what a win-win looks like, and being made whole. And so there's a lot of good things to discuss, and hopefully we can make this work, and we can win. And if we can't, then that's okay too.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Are there any final questions or comments for staff?
Mr. City Manager, go ahead.
Yeah, but if I could, just bring Councilmember Galarza, Mayor Pro Tem Galarza, up to speed on this too, just because this is a pretty big decision. So just so
Will do, sir.
So the last two, we'll take that as council direction on this item. Just want to make that clear for the record.
sounds good. All right. Well, there's no other items on the agenda. We'll be reconvening in a few days. So see you guys soon. And
Mr. Mayor, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Can I just say one, and I don't know the protocol, so I apologize. Listen, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the time. And thank you for this. Thank you for the conversation, the robust conversation. It just, again, we just want to be clear that, this may not work out, right? And it is what it is. In that case, this may not be able to go forward. I think we shared with staff just our risks, our concerns. And let me say this, we'll certainly, we'll move it to, I forget what the date was, February, whatever, 7th, February something. But just so you hear it from us, just the concerns about the grant funds remaining intact and what's going on there. So we appreciate it. We'll continue to work with the city staff, and thank you very much for the time.
thank you. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye.